What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Reality Roundtable. I'm your host, Jonathan Brown. And I appreciate you for being here today, wherever you're listening to this podcast, or however you're listening to it. And on today's episode, I want to talk about something that doesn't really get celebrated enough. And that is staying down until you're able to come up. Because not every season in your life has to be very grandiose or very loud. And it doesn't need to always be an announcement. And it doesn't always need validation from other people. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay quiet, focus, and build in silence. And honestly, that's hard to do in today's world because everything pushes you to perform publicly. People want to look successful before they actually become successful. People want attention before discipline, recognition before consistency, and results before the work. But real growth happens in private. The uncomfortable nights, the lonely early mornings, the sacrifices that no one ever sees, and the discipline that no one ever claps for. But during all that is where the transformation actually starts. So today, we're going to talk about observing silently, staying out of the forefront, ignoring outside noise, staying focused on your own goals, moving in silence, and staying consistent long enough for your life to actually change. And this episode is really for people who feel overlooked right now. The people who are actually grinding quietly, and the people who are trying to become something greater without needing everybody to know every step. Because sometimes staying down is exactly how you come up. So let's get into the episode. One thing I've learned is that you can learn a lot more when you stop feeling like you need to always be seen. A lot of people walk into every room trying to impress others, trying to do the most talking, and trying to prove something. But quiet observation is actually powerful. When you observe silently, you start to notice patterns. You notice how people move when things go wrong. You notice the fake energy. You notice who only supports you when it benefits them. And you notice who's disciplined and who only talks about discipline. And honestly, some of the smartest people in the room, most of the time, are not the loudest people in the room. They are just there paying attention. That's something social media has kind of damaged. A lot of people feel pressure to constantly broadcast their thoughts, goals, and every move that they make. But there's true value in being silent. Not everything needs an opinion. Sometimes silence protects your vision. Because the moment you tell certain people your plans, they project their fears onto you. Some examples of that are you sure that's realistic? That probably won't work. And everybody's already doing that. And if you're not mentally strong enough, outside opinions can slowly weaken your confidence. That's why you need to build quietly instead. Not because you're hiding, but because it protects your focus. I remember hearing a saying when someone said, seeds grow underground first. And honestly, that really stuck with me. Because growth doesn't always look impressive in the beginning. Sometimes it looks boring, lonely, and repetitive. But underground growth is still growth, even if a lot of people don't see it. And a lot of people quit too early because they don't see immediate results. They want visible success instantly. But real success usually develops in private long before the world notices it publicly. That's why observation matters as well. When you slow down and stop chasing attention, you start learning from everything around you. You learn from successful people, you learn from your own failures and also their failures. And honestly, those mistakes and failures become valuable when you actually pay attention to them. Some people repeat the same cycles because they never stop long enough to actually reflect. Observation creates awareness, and awareness changes lives. And I think one of the biggest lies people believe is that visibility equals value. That's simply not the case. Just because somebody is loud online doesn't mean they're actually progressing in real life. And just because your growth isn't visible yet doesn't mean you're failing. A lot of people are addicted to appearances. They want to look successful more than they want to become successful. And that mindset is dangerous because it makes people skip the process. They want quick results, validation, and attention. But anything built too fast usually falls apart just as fast. Sometimes your season right now is meant for preparation and not performance. And preparation seasons are uncomfortable because usually they go unnoticed. Nobody claps for consistency in the beginning, and nobody applauds the early mornings. Nobody celebrates discipline when there are no results yet. But those quiet moments matter the most, because what you repeatedly do in private eventually shapes your public reality. I think some people delay their own growth because they spend too much time trying to prove something. They're too busy trying to prove that they're successful, happy, and that they're winning. Meanwhile, the people truly building something are often too busy working to consistently announce it. And now, I'm not saying that all visibility is bad, but that visibility without substance becomes empty. That's why some people look successful online, but internally they're exhausted, lost, financially struggling, or they're emotionally drained. The image becomes more important than reality. And eventually, that catches up to people. That's why staying down matters. You need seasons where you focus entirely on development. Whether that's learning, improving, sharpening your mindset, and building discipline. Without needing everybody's approval along the way. Because approval can become addictive as well. Once people start clapping for you, it's easy to become dependent on that applause. But what happens when nobody notices your effort anymore? Can you stay disciplined after that? That right there is one of the real tests. One thing about life, information compounds. The things you learn today may not make sense immediately, but later on they become useful in ways that you didn't expect. And that's why every season matters. Even the slow seasons, even the frustrating seasons. You might feel like nothing is happening right now, but you're developing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Sometimes life is preparing you for opportunities that you haven't even seen yet. And preparation is rarely exciting. People love outcomes, but preparation is repetitive. Reading when no one else is reading, practicing when nobody's watching, and learning skills before they become necessary. That's how you separate yourself long term. And one of the ways that people can relate to this is when it comes to athletes. Because unlike the people who are actually training, people on the outside only see game day. But they don't see all the training that the athlete does. They don't see the conditioning, the film study, the recovery, and the sacrifices made along the way. The game is just a visible result of invisible preparation. And life works the same way. And honestly, a lot of people underestimate the power of learning quietly. Everybody wants immediate application. But sometimes you're just gathering tools for your future self. You may read something today that changes your mindset 3 years from now. And you may develop discipline that saves your life later. That's why consistency matters even when results feel delayed. Delayed results doesn't mean wasted effort. A lot of breakthroughs happen after long periods of invisible progress. And unfortunately, many people quit right before things start changing because they confuse silence with failure. But silence doesn't always mean nothing is happening. Sometimes the roots are just growing. Outside noise can destroy your focus if you let it. And today, there's more outside noise than ever before. There's opinions, comparisons, social media, and people projecting insecurities onto others. Everybody has something to say about how somebody else should live. And if you listen to all of it, you'll become mentally exhausted. That's why protecting your mind is important. Not every opinion deserves access to your emotions. Some people criticize because they're afraid to try themselves. And some people mock discipline because it reminds them of their lack of discipline. And some people simply don't understand your vision because it wasn't given to them. And you know what? That's okay. Everybody doesn't need to understand your path. Only you do. And in my opinion, I think comparison is one of the biggest focus killers as well. The moment you constantly compare your timeline to somebody else's, you start disrespecting your own progress. And social media makes this worse because most people usually only post highlights. You see somebody's success, but you don't see the years of struggle behind that success. You see the reward, but not the sacrifices. And comparison creates unnecessary pressure. You start feeling behind. You start rushing, and you start doubting yourself. But life is not a race. Everybody's timing is different. Some people bloom early, and some people bloom later. The important thing is continuing to grow, not competing with everybody else's chapter. And honestly, peace becomes easier when you stop needing to prove yourself. When you stop needing validation, when you stop explaining every move, and when you stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. Then your energy becomes more focused, and focused energy changes lives. Now, this is a lesson that I think everybody should be able to take. Not every plan needs to be announced, because sometimes talking too much about goals creates a false sense of accomplishment. You get excited from the reaction instead of the actual work. People congratulate you before you've even started, and sometimes that kills momentum, because mentally you've already received the reward. That's why moving in silence can be powerful. Let your actions speak first. Let the results make the announcement. And also, not everybody around you genuinely wants you to succeed. That's just the reality of things. Some people support you until your growth becomes uncomfortable for them. Until your discipline reminds them of what they're avoiding. And that doesn't mean you become paranoid or isolated. It just means you become more selective. More selective with your energy, conversations, and who gets access to your vision. Because goals are fragile in the beginning, and too much outside energy can affect them. That's why sometimes silence is protection, not secrecy. You don't owe the world constant updates. You don't have to post every move, idea, or opportunity. Some of the best things happen in silence. Consistency is one of the rarest qualities of today. People get motivated quickly, and they also quit quickly. Because motivation is emotional, and consistency is commitment. Consistency means continuing even when the feelings change. Even when progress feels slow, when nobody notices, and when things get repetitive. That's what separates temporary interest from real dedication. And consistency is usually boring. Nobody wants to hear that part though. People want dramatic breakthroughs. But most success comes from ordinary repeated actions over long periods of time. Daily discipline, daily focus, and daily effort is what really changes lives. And the truth is, staying consistent requires emotional control as well. Because some days you won't feel inspired. Some days you will doubt yourself. And some days in life will feel heavy. But discipline carries you on days that the motivation disappears. And that's why routines, habits, and your environment matter. You have to build systems that help you keep going, even when emotions fluctuate, because emotions are temporary, but consistent effort compounds. At the end of the day, staying down to come up is really about trusting the process long enough to keep building, even when nobody sees immediate results. It's about understanding that silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy, growth, and protection. And one day, the same people who overlook your quiet season will suddenly notice the results. But by then, you won't even need the validation anymore, because you'll know what it took to get there. The lonely nights, the discipline, sacrifice, focus, and consistency. That right there is the real reward. So if you're in a quiet season right now, don't panic. Keep learning, keep building, keep observing, and keep growing. Your life can change slowly, then all at once. And sometimes the strongest move you can make is staying down long enough to truly come up. I appreciate you for listening to the episode if you got all the way through. This is your host, Jonathan Brown, and I'll be back with another episode of Reality Roundtable next week, Wednesday at 12 p.m. Thank you, and have a great day.